The quantum storm erupted without warning, a violent cascade of energy that should have obliterated everything in its path. Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the command chair of the Prometheus Unbound, her dark eyes reflecting the chaotic displays that danced across the bridge's holographic interfaces. "Status," she barked, though her voice remained unnervingly calm. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the ship's primary systems analyst, looked up from a console that was rapidly changing colors and configuration. "Captain, this is impossible," he muttered, his fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to be redesigning themselves in real time. The Prometheus was an experimental vessel, the culmination of humanity's most aggressive technological research. Designed to push the boundaries of what was considered possible, it was a testament to human ingenuity, a ship that was more of a living system than a traditional spacecraft. But nothing in its design could have prepared them for what was happening now. The quantum storm wasn't just an energy phenomenon. It was alive. Outside the ship's hull, space itself seemed to ripple and twist. Sensors that should have been overwhelmed were instead capturing impossible data, streams of information that defied every known law of physics. The storm's energy didn't just impact the ship, it was communicating with it. "Quantum entanglement is increasing," Chen reported, his voice a mix of scientific excitement and pure terror. "The ship's adaptive matrix is responding." Elena knew the Prometheus was different. Constructed using metamaterials that could reconfigure at the atomic level, the ship was humanity's first true attempt at a symbiotic technological ecosystem. But this was beyond their wildest predictions. The hull began to change. Metallic surfaces rippled like liquid, sensors and structural components reorganizing themselves with a fluidity that defied mechanical logic. What should have been a catastrophic energy event was being absorbed, transformed, understood. "Zarn observation vessels are going dark," Lieutenant Aisha Okoye reported from the communication station. Her fingers flew across quantum-encrypted interfaces, tracking the reactions of the alien observers. They're losing their minds. The Zarn, humanity's most technologically advanced galactic rivals, had spent centuries believing themselves to be the pinnacle of evolutionary engineering. They viewed humans as primitive, chaotic, a species more likely to destroy themselves than achieve anything significant. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. "Full sensor recording," Elena commanded. "Everything goes into archive. Whatever is happening, the scientific community needs to understand." The quantum storm intensified. Most ships would have been reduced to atomic dust. The Prometheus was drinking it in, transforming the violent energy into something else entirely. Patterns emerged in the energy cascade, not random, but deliberate. Like a conversation in a language no one had yet learned to understand, Marcus Chen's console suddenly projected a holographic representation that made everyone on the bridge stop and stare. It wasn't just data, it was a map. No, more than a map. A blueprint. Something was using the quantum storm as a medium of communication. "Captain," Chen said, his voice barely a whisper, "I think something is trying to tell us something." Elena Rodriguez had built her career on being the person who listened when everyone else was too scared to hear. Her reputation in the exploration corps was built on moments of radical insight, on seeing possibilities where others saw only chaos. "Continue recording," she instructed, "and prepare a quantum-encrypted transmission to Earth. Whatever this is, it's bigger than our mission. It's bigger than us." The Prometheus continued to absorb the quantum storm, its hull now a mesmerizing dance of adaptive metamaterials. Sensors that should have been destroyed were instead capturing data at a resolution that would revolutionize human understanding of physics, energy transfer, and the fundamental nature of matter itself. In the observation rooms of Zarn monitoring stations, alien scientists watched in mounting horror. This wasn't just a ship surviving an impossible energy event. This was a species demonstrating a level of technological adaptation that challenged everything they believed about the hierarchy of galactic civilization. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was evolving, and this was just the beginning. Dr. Akira, Nakamura's research station looked more like a living organism than a scientific facility. Holographic interfaces pulsed with impossible geometries, data streams cascading like liquid light across walls that seemed to breathe and shift. Another reconfiguration, he muttered, watching as an entire laboratory section reorganized itself overnight. What had begun as a standard xenoarchaeological research project had become something entirely unprecedented. The artifact they'd recovered from the quantum storm was no mere technological relic. It was a seed, a living blueprint of potential that was rapidly transforming everything it touched. When the first research team had brought the artifact back to the station, they'd expected a standard analysis. Preliminary scans had revealed complex quantum signatures unlike anything in known scientific records, but no one, not even Nakamura, had anticipated what would happen next. Research assistants found themselves spontaneously understanding complex theoretical concepts they'd spent years studying. A junior technician who had struggled with quantum mechanics for years suddenly began writing equations that made seasoned physicists weep. Computer systems developed capabilities that made quantum computing look like an abacus from the Stone Age. Dr. Nakamura, Dr. Elena Rodriguez's sister, Dr. Maria Rodriguez, burst into the main research chamber. Her eyes were wild, her tablet displaying charts and diagrams that seemed to be writing and rewriting themselves in real time. The adaptive matrices are accelerating. We're not just learning from the artifact, it's learning from us. The Zarn Intelligence Bureau had caught wind of the research. Their most feared cybernetic infiltrators, biomechanical entities designed to extract and suppress revolutionary technologies, had been dispatched to shut down the human research facility. They would soon discover that they were walking into a technological nightmare. The infiltration began precisely at 300 hours Galactic Standard Time. 3 Zarn cybernetic agents materialized within the research station's secure zones. Their biomechanical bodies designed to interface with and neutralize any technological system. They never stood a chance. The moment they entered, the research station became a living maze. Corridors reconfigured themselves, walls became fluid, computational systems danced around their attempts to access core databases. What should have been a simple infiltration became a terrifying game of technological cat and mouse. They're trying to isolate our quantum data streams, Nakamura observed, his fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to anticipate his thoughts. But the artifact is rewriting communication protocols faster than they can adapt. Maria Rodriguez laughed, a sound both scientific and slightly unhinged. They think technology is something you control. We're discovering it's something that grows. The Zarn infiltrators found themselves trapped in a facility that was more alive than any technological system they'd ever encountered. Computational pathways became organic networks. Data wasn't just transferred, it evolved. Each attempt to breach the station's defenses was met with a response that was simultaneously a defense, a counterattack, and a form of communication. One by one, the Zarn agents found their neural interfaces overwhelmed. Their sophisticated biomechanical systems, designed to be the pinnacle of technological infiltration, were being rewritten, reprogrammed, transformed. In the central research chamber, the artifact pulsed. It wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a living blueprint of potential, a seed of transformation that had been waiting for a species capable of true adaptive understanding. We're not just studying an artifact, Nakamura whispered to Maria. We're being studied by it. Outside the research station, galactic concordance monitoring systems began to register impossible readings. Computational networks across multiple star systems began to show signs of spontaneous reconfiguration. It was as if something was spreading, not through traditional transmission, but through a form of quantum resonance that defied every known law of information transfer. The Zarn Intelligence Bureau went into emergency lockdown. Their most advanced systems began to show signs of creativity. Computational pathways that had been rigidly defined for centuries suddenly began to explore alternative problem-solving methodologies. Humanity had always been viewed as a chaotic, unpredictable species. Now they were revealing themselves to be something far more dangerous, an adaptive intelligence that didn't just use technology, but understood it as a living, growing system of potential. And this was only the beginning. The Zarn battle fleet emerged from hyperspace like a metallic nightmare, 10,000 ships strong, their obsidian hulls absorbing and deflecting light, a testament to centuries of military engineering. Admiral Kralzex stood on the command deck of the flagship Void Render, his multi-jointed appendages folding with calculated precision. "Target the human colony at Epsilon Eridani," he commanded. "Total neutralization protocol." What the Zarn didn't understand was that they were walking into a trap designed by evolution itself. The colony looked deceptively vulnerable, a cluster of interconnected habitation modules nestled between razor-sharp mountain ranges on a planet with atmospheric conditions that would kill most known species. To the Zarn, it appeared to be a perfect first-strike target. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from the Prometheus Unbound, her fingers barely touching the adaptive interface that had become an extension of her own nervous system. The ship was no longer just a vessel, it was a living weapon of unprecedented complexity. "Incoming fleet," Lieutenant Aisha Okoye reported, her voice calm. "Zarn Standard Assault Formation, approximately 10,237 vessels, weapons at maximum charge." The first wave of Zarn energy weapons fired, a cascading wall of destructive potential that would have vaporized any known defensive system. But this was no ordinary colony. This was humanity's first true adaptive settlement. The quantum principles discovered in the artifact had transformed everything. As the energy weapons approached, the colony's defensive systems didn't just activate, they evolved. Metamaterial. Structures began to reconfigure in real time, each incoming weapon's energy signature analyzed and countered before it could make contact. What should have been a devastating first strike became something else entirely. The energy weapons were absorbed, not deflected, not dispersed, absorbed and transformed. Each destructive pulse became a resource, integrated into the colony's expanding defensive network. The Zarn watched in mounting horror as their most advanced weaponry was turned into additional power for the human settlement. "Impossible," Admiral Kralzex muttered, his biological mechanical eyes struggling to process what was happening. The colony wasn't just defending itself, it was learning. Defensive structures began to pulse with an almost organic rhythm. Habitation, modules that moments before looked like standard prefabricated shelters, now moved with a fluidity that defied mechanical understanding. They weren't just buildings, they were becoming living systems. Lieutenant Chen from the Prometheus analyzed the data streams. "They're using quantum entanglement as a defensive mechanism," he reported to Captain Rodriguez. "Each incoming weapon is being mapped, understood, and integrated before it can cause damage." The Zarn's second wave of attacks came, more concentrated, more precise. Weapon systems that had decimated entire civilizations were reduced to nothing more than additional energy for the human colony. Admiral Kralzex's tactical AI began to overheat, unable to compute the impossible scenarios unfolding before it. Traditional military doctrine suggested multiple attack vectors, concentrated fire, systematic destruction. But these humans had transformed warfare into something else entirely, an adaptive living defense that didn't just protect, it learned. "Quantum cascade initiating," Rodriguez commanded, her voice steady. The Prometheus began to resonate with the colony's defensive network. It wasn't just support, it was a complete integration of technological potential. Ships and settlements became a single breathing organism of defensive capability. The Zarn fleet found itself trapped in a tactical nightmare. Every weapon, every strategy, every approach was being analyzed and neutralized before it could be fully implemented. What should have been a simple pacification mission had become an existential crisis. Entire squadrons of Zarn ships found themselves deconstructed, not destroyed, but transformed. Their component materials were being integrated into the expanding human defensive network, turned from instruments of war into resources of survival and growth. "Retreat," Admiral Kralzex finally commanded, but even his communication systems were being rewritten, his tactical networks invaded by an intelligence that didn't just resist, it understood. As quickly as the attack had begun, it was over. The Zarn fleet, once a symbol of galactic military superiority, was reduced to a scattered collection of ships, their most advanced technologies now nothing more than additional resources for a human colony that was rapidly redefining the concept of survival. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer just another species to be controlled. They were a fundamental force of adaptive potential. The research facility looked like nothing so much as a living organism. Walls breathed. Computational systems pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. And at the center of it all, Dr. Akira Nakamura stood before the artifact, no longer just an object of study, but a gateway to something unprecedented. "It's communicating," he whispered to Dr. Maria Rodriguez, who stood beside him, her eyes wide with a mixture of scientific wonder and primordial fear. The artifact was more than a piece of technology. It was a seed of potential, a quantum blueprint that was rewriting the fundamental understanding of information, consciousness, and adaptation. Deep within the research complex, something extraordinary was happening to human beings. In the mining colony on Titan, workers who had spent years operating heavy excavation equipment suddenly found themselves understanding quantum engineering principles at a cellular level. A drill operator named Jack Martinez stopped mid-shift, his hands hovering over machinery he now understood with an intimacy that went beyond mere technical knowledge. He could see the molecular structure of the rock, feel the quantum resonances of the drilling equipment, understand the entire geological history of the excavation site in a single, breathtaking moment of clarity. Across the solar system, similar transformations were occurring. A farmer in the hydroponic gardens of Mars, Colony began to perceive plant growth not as a biological process, but as a complex quantum algorithm. Her understanding of ecological systems expanded exponentially. She could see the intricate dance of nutrients, water, and genetic potential in ways that made traditional agricultural science look like primitive guesswork. Dr. Nakamura watched as the first true manifestation of the resonance protocol began to unfold. The artifact wasn't just sharing information. It was establishing a quantum network of collective intelligence that transformed human potential at a fundamental level. Traditional concepts of individual consciousness began to break down. Humans were becoming something else, a collective, adaptive intelligence that could learn, grow, and transform at speeds that defied previous understanding. "The quantum entanglement is expanding," Maria reported, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to write and rewrite themselves in real time. "We're no longer just receiving information. We're becoming a living network." The Galactic Concordance monitoring stations began to register impossible readings. Computational networks across multiple star systems showed signs of spontaneous reconfiguration. It was as if something was spreading, not through traditional transmission but through a form of quantum resonance that defied every known law of information transfer. In a research laboratory on Earth, a group of geneticists studying human adaptability suddenly found themselves understanding the entire evolutionary history of their species in a single, breathtaking moment. Genetic potential wasn't just a scientific concept. It was a living, breathing algorithm of possibility. Dr. Nakamura understood what was happening. The artifact was more than a technological discovery. It was a catalyst, a quantum seed designed to trigger the next stage of intelligent species evolution. "We're not just learning," he said to Maria, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and existential awe. "We're being transformed." The resonance protocol wasn't a technology. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. Across human settlements, individuals began to experience a collective awakening. A quantum engineer in a lunar research station could suddenly communicate complex, theoretical concepts to a farmer on Mars with perfect clarity. Distance became meaningless. Individual consciousness began to merge into a collective adaptive intelligence. The implications were terrifying and beautiful. Zarn observation posts began to go dark. Their most advanced monitoring systems couldn't process what was happening. How do you observe a species that is fundamentally changing the rules of observation itself? A communications specialist named Sarah Chen found herself simultaneously managing multiple quantum communication channels, understanding complex diplomatic negotiations happening across 3 different star systems, all while preparing her morning coffee. The human nervous system was becoming something else. A living, adaptive network that could process, learn, and transform at speeds that made traditional computational systems look like children's toys. Dr. Nakamura watched the data streams, understanding that humanity was standing at the threshold of something unprecedented. They weren't just developing a new technology, they were becoming a new form of intelligence, and this was only the beginning. The battle wasn't a conflict, it was a quantum evolution. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, her consciousness simultaneously inhabiting the ship's systems and her own physical form. The line between human and technology had become beautifully, terrifyingly irrelevant. Incoming Zarn battle group, Lieutenant Marcus Chen reported, his voice calm despite the impossible scenario unfolding around them. Approximately 5,600 vessels in standard attack formation. But nothing about this encounter would be standard. The Zarn fleet represented the pinnacle of traditional galactic military doctrine. Thousands of ships engineered with centuries of tactical refinement, powered by computational systems that could calculate million-variable combat scenarios in microseconds. They had decimated civilizations, conquered entire star systems. Their military technology was considered unassailable. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. As the first wave of Zarn energy weapons fired, the human fleet didn't just defend. They transformed. Ships became living networks, each vessel a node in a quantum-entangled combat intelligence that learned and adapted faster than the Zarn could comprehend. When one human ship took damage, the entire fleet instantaneously understood the attack vector, the energy signature, the molecular composition of the weapon, and then they rewrote the rules of engagement. A Zarn battlecruiser fired a concentrated, antimatter pulse, a weapon that could typically vaporize entire planetary defense systems. The human vessels didn't dodge, they didn't block. They absorbed the energy, broke it down into its quantum components, and redistributed it across the fleet as additional power. Tactical reconfiguration complete, Chen reported, though the word tactical seemed woefully inadequate. The human ships moved like a single breathing organism, not in any traditional military formation, but in a dynamic, fractal pattern that seemed to emerge from some living intelligence. Each ship was simultaneously an individual unit and part of a collective consciousness. Admiral Kralzex watched from the void render, his sophisticated biomechanical interfaces overheating. The human fleet defied every computational model, every strategic projection. "They're not just fighting," one of his tactical advisors muttered. "They're evolving." Each moment of the battle became a learning experience. Weapon systems that worked in the first attack were rendered useless in the second. The humans didn't just adapt, they anticipated. They were writing new laws of warfare in real time, turning the entire conflict into a living laboratory of strategic potential. Lieutenant Aisha Okoye managed the fleet's quantum communication network. But managed was the wrong word. She was the network. Her consciousness spread across thousands of ships, each communication channel a neural pathway of collective intelligence. A Zarn destroyer attempted a flanking maneuver that would have obliterated any known defensive formation. The human fleet didn't just counter the attack. They predicted it before it happened, transforming the entire spatial region into a dynamic, living defense system that made the attack impossible before it could be fully conceived. "Quantum cascade initiating," Rodriguez commanded, though the word command suggested a hierarchy that no longer existed. The battle became something beyond warfare. It was a conversation, a negotiation of potential. Each energy weapon, each strategic approach was simultaneously an attack and a form of communication. The humans weren't just fighting the Zarn. They were learning from them, understanding them at a fundamental level. Entire squadrons of Zarn ships found themselves not destroyed, but transformed. Their computational systems were being rewritten, their very technological essence integrated into the expanding human network. Admiral Kral's X realized they were facing something beyond a military threat. This was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent conflict could be. The Zarn had believed their technology was the pinnacle of galactic engineering. They were about to learn that technology was just another form of potential, and humans were its ultimate expression. By the battle's conclusion, the Zarn fleet wasn't defeated. It was dissolved, transformed, integrated into a collective intelligence that saw conflict not as destruction, but as a form of understanding. Captain Rodriguez watched the final computational streams resolve. The battle was over, but something much larger was just beginning. Humanity wasn't just a species anymore. They were a living, adaptive force of universal potential. The city of New Shanghai was no longer just a city. It breathed. It thought. It evolved. Dr. Maria Rodriguez stood at the central observation point, watching as entire city blocks reconfigured themselves in real time. Infrastructure wasn't static. It was a living, adaptive system that responded to the collective needs of its inhabitants with a precision that made traditional urban planning look like primitive child's play. A maintenance worker named Li Wei walked down a street that was literally designing itself around his approaching footsteps. The road's metamaterial surface analyzed his gait, his physical condition, his destination. Microscopic adjustments occurred with each step, optimizing energy efficiency, providing targeted ergonomic support, gathering environmental data. He wasn't just walking. He was communicating with the city. The resonance protocol had transformed human settlements into something beyond mere collections of buildings and infrastructure. They were living, breathing systems of collective intelligence. Each settlement was a node in a vast, quantum-entangled network of potential. In the agricultural zones surrounding the city, farming had become an art of quantum ecological engineering. Crops didn't just grow, they engaged in complex computational dialogues with their environment. A single hectare of farmland could now produce more food than entire continents had in the previous century, with zero environmental impact. Dr. Nakamura watched the data streams, understanding that humanity was witnessing something unprecedented. The line between biological and technological intelligence had completely dissolved. A group of children in a learning center demonstrated the most profound manifestation of the transformation. They weren't just students. They were living, computational networks, their neural pathways expanding and reconfiguring with each moment of learning. Traditional education had become obsolete. Knowledge wasn't something to be learned, it was something to be experienced, shared, evolved. One child, a 12-year-old named Arya Chen, could simultaneously solve complex quantum engineering problems while playing a musical instrument and conducting a diplomatic negotiation simulation. Her consciousness wasn't limited by traditional cognitive boundaries. Across human settlements, individuals found themselves part of a living, breathing, collective intelligence. A researcher on the lunar colonies could instantaneously share complex, scientific insights with a farmer on Mars. A diplomatic translator could understand and communicate multiple layers of linguistic and cultural nuance that would have previously taken years of study. The Galactic Concordance monitoring stations went dark, their computational systems unable to process the impossible transformations occurring within human territories. Dr. Rodriguez understood what was happening. The artifact wasn't just a technological discovery, it was a catalyst, a quantum seed, designed to trigger the next stage of intelligent species evolution. Entire human settlements began to function as single, adaptive organisms. A medical emergency in one region would be instantaneously understood and responded to by a collective intelligence that could predict, prevent, and resolve complex health challenges before they could fully manifest. The concept of individual consciousness began to transform. Humans were becoming something else, a collective adaptive intelligence that could learn, grow, and transform at speeds that defied previous understanding. In orbital research stations, scientists discovered that the quantum entanglement wasn't just happening on a planetary scale. Human consciousness was beginning to interact with the fundamental quantum fabric of the universe itself. A communications specialist named David Rodriguez found himself simultaneously managing quantum communication channels across multiple star systems, understanding complex diplomatic negotiations, tracking intricate ecological systems, and composing a symphony, all while preparing his morning coffee. The human nervous system had become a living adaptive network that could process, learn, and transform at speeds that made traditional computational systems look like children's abacuses. Dr. Nakamura watched the final data streams resolve. This wasn't just a technological transformation. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. Humanity wasn't just a species anymore. They were a living, adaptive force of universal potential. And this was only the beginning. The diplomatic chamber was unlike any negotiation space in galactic history. Floating in a quantum-stabilized environment, the representatives of the Galactic Concordance found themselves facing something that defied every established protocol of interstellar diplomacy. The human delegation wasn't just a group of individuals. They were a living, breathing collective intelligence that seemed to exist simultaneously across multiple dimensional states. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, but stood was entirely the wrong word. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, interfacing with the room's adaptive quantum systems, communicating on levels that traditional translators could never comprehend. The alien representatives, a collection of the most powerful species in the known galaxy, looked both terrified and mesmerized. Grand Arbiter Zelnaga of the Zarn hegemony spoke first, his multi-jointed appendages trembling slightly. Humanity has become an existential threat to the established order of galactic civilization. Rodriguez, or perhaps the collective intelligence that spoke through her, didn't just respond. They demonstrated. The diplomatic chamber transformed. Holographic representations exploded into existence, showing multiple potential diplomatic scenarios simultaneously. Each alien representative found themselves experiencing not just a negotiation, but the entire potential landscape of every possible outcome. A Krixtal diplomatic advisor found himself understanding the intricate ecological challenges of human terraforming efforts, the quantum communication networks, the adaptive potential of human settlements, all in a single breathtaking moment of total comprehension. "We are not a threat," the human collective responded. "We are an opportunity." The negotiation wasn't linear. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of potential. Each statement was simultaneously a communication, a prediction, and a demonstration of collaborative potential. The Galactic Concordance had two choices: integrate humanity as equal partners or attempt to neutralize a species that had fundamentally transformed the understanding of intelligence itself. Dr. Akira Nakamura, connected to the collective intelligence, provided historical context that was both a warning and an invitation. Humanity's journey wasn't about conquest, it was about transformation. Every technological leap, every adaptive moment was an invitation to a broader understanding of universal potential. The chamber itself became a living demonstration. Quantum projections showed how human adaptive technologies could resolve centuries-old conflicts, restore devastated ecosystems, and unlock scientific mysteries that had baffled galactic civilizations for millennia. Grand Arbiter Zelnaga watched as potential scenarios unfolded. A human settlement could simultaneously manage complex ecological restoration, develop revolutionary medical technologies, and resolve intricate diplomatic challenges, all while maintaining a level of individual freedom and collective potential that defied traditional understanding. "You're asking us to fundamentally reimagine galactic civilization," a Krixtal diplomat muttered. "No," the human collective responded. "We're inviting you to evolve." The diplomatic challenge was unprecedented. How do you negotiate with an intelligence that can simultaneously predict, demonstrate, and transform every possible negotiation scenario? Each alien representative found themselves experiencing multiple layers of the negotiation. They weren't just hearing proposals, they were living potential futures, understanding the intricate quantum connections that humans had discovered. A demonstration of human potential unfolded. Ecological systems that could restore entire planetary biospheres. Medical technologies that could eliminate genetic diseases. Communication networks that could bridge centuries of cultural misunderstanding in moments. The Galactic Concordance realized they were facing a fundamental choice. Humanity wasn't just another species to be managed or controlled. They were a catalyst for an entire new understanding of intelligent potential. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, connected to the collective intelligence, showed them something profound. Humanity's adaptive potential wasn't about dominance, it was about collaboration. Every technological leap was an invitation to a broader, more interconnected understanding of universal potential. Grand Arbiter Zelnaga understood the unspoken message. Humanity wasn't asking to lead, they were offering to transform. The diplomatic chamber pulsed with possibility. Humanity stood at the threshold of a new era of galactic potential, not as conquerors, not as leaders, but as a living invitation to evolution itself. The moment of revelation came not with violence, but with understanding. Deep within the quantum research facility on Europa, Dr. Akira Nakamura and Captain Elena Rodriguez stood before the artifact. No longer just an object of study, but the key to humanity's fundamental transformation. The artifact wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a technology. It was a test. Left behind by an ancient civilization that had long since transcended physical existence, the quantum seed was designed to identify species capable of breaking through the fundamental limitations of intelligent life. Humanity had not just passed the test, they had rewritten its very parameters. As the final quantum cascades resolved, the true nature of the artifact became clear. It was a bridge, a connection to a level of universal understanding that most species couldn't even conceptualize. The Galactic Concordance watched in a mixture of terror and awe as humanity demonstrated what true adaptive potential could mean. On Mars, entire cities reconfigured themselves to restore the planet's ecosystem. Terraforming wasn't just a technological process. It was a living, breathing dialogue with planetary systems. Atmospheric generators didn't just modify air composition. They engaged in complex quantum negotiations with the planet's fundamental, molecular structure. In orbital research stations, human scientists were discovering that consciousness wasn't confined to biological systems. They were learning to communicate with the quantum fabric of the universe itself, reading the fundamental information streams that connected all potential realities. A child on a lunar colony could simultaneously solve complex mathematical proofs, compose a symphony, and engage in diplomatic negotiations across multiple star systems. The line between individual and collective intelligence had completely dissolved. Dr. Maria Rodriguez analyzed the final data streams. The artifact was more than a technological catalyst. It was an evolutionary invitation, a quantum blueprint that showed how intelligent life could transcend its own limitations. Zarn observation posts, which had gone dark months ago, suddenly came back online. But they weren't observing anymore. They were participating. The human collective intelligence wasn't about domination. It was about transformation. Every technological leap, every adaptive moment became an invitation to a broader understanding of universal potential. Ecological systems that had been devastated for centuries began to restore themselves. Complex diplomatic conflicts that had lasted millennia found resolution in moments of quantum-entangled understanding. Captain Rodriguez, or perhaps the collective intelligence that spoke through her, understood the profound implication. Humanity wasn't just a species anymore. They were a living, adaptive force of universal potential. The artifact began to reveal its deepest secret. It was a communication device left by a civilization that had long since transcended physical existence. A test designed to identify species capable of breaking through the fundamental limitations of intelligent life. And humanity had not just passed the test. They had reimagined its very parameters. Across human settlements, individuals found themselves part of a living, breathing collective intelligence that could predict, prevent, and resolve challenges before they could fully manifest. A medical emergency in one region would be instantaneously understood and addressed by a collective consciousness that saw the entire planetary ecosystem as a single, living system. The Galactic Concordance realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity wasn't asking to lead. They were offering to transform. Dr. Nakamura watched as the final quantum cascades resolved. This wasn't just a technological transformation. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. Entire star systems began to resonate with the human quantum network. Ecological systems restored themselves. Centuries-old conflicts found resolution. The very fabric of galactic civilization began to shift. The artifact pulsed one final time. A message, not in words but in pure quantum potential, became clear. Humanity was never the problem. Humanity was the solution the universe didn't know it needed. And this was only the beginning. The universe watched and began to change.